press conference on the progress of Kwara Youth Circle aftermath of the Leadership Summit held at MBA Hall, High Court Ilorin on 2nd of November 2020. Establishing all due protocols, I welcome you all to this press conference. I am Mahmoud Abdullahi Loke, the convener of Kwara Youth Circle. This month is the commemoration of International Youth Day, and the theme is Transforming Food System, Youth Innovation of Human and Planetary Health. This theme highlights the success of every state or country is highly dependent on meaningful participation of young people. Kwara youths have long internalized these facts to the extent that last year we convened as one body at a well-represented youth summit on the 2nd of November 2020 at MBA Hall, High Court, Ilorin. In attendance were a delegation from Kwara State Government, delegation led by Commissioner for Sport and Youth Development, student leaders, delegates of civil societies and young socio-cultural movements, community development strategists, social impact advocates, pressmen, social media influencers, political groups, religion groups, and concerned Kwaras. 5 core issues were itemized at the summit, and they were: critique of the Kwara youth state of mind, youth in statecraft, Kwara State's performance in recent national development plans, Agenda 2050, MTNDP in perspective. D. Issues on inclusive governance with focus on gender and PWLD as people living with disabilities. Unfolding realities in Nigerian statehood and Kwara's strategic plan as people. The 5 core issues were each led by panelists, and following submission were made after much deliberation. State of mind. Participants agreed that Kwara states have competent youths that can rival their peers anywhere across the country. Educational tourism also attracts the best brain to this state, and the serenity here has led to bring in because many brilliant graduates choose Kwara as home and business base, and they have been warmly received by the indigenous youths. However, there is need to improve the self-esteem of indigenous Kwara youths to believe in themselves and reach their potential. Some participants argue that the low self-esteem in some youths results from their humble background and aftermath of years of poverty. Others affirm that it is the political elite that has destroyed the self-esteem of the youths by buying their conscience and consciousness in order to reduce them to eternal followers. Youth in statecraft. Participants appreciate the gains of more meaningful youth engagement in Kwara politics. In recent times, they resolve that we can best consolidate this by offering great performance whenever we assume political leadership. Deliberation ensured on how we can gain experience in governance if we are not given leadership position. One of the panelists pointed out that system leadership is the ideal platform one can make impact as a youth, whether or not you get leadership position. Therefore, the clamor for youth takeover of leadership position should rather be focused on youths making impact in their discipline, as this would ultimately put youth in the spotlight for position. In mention, community development, social impact initiative, and civic engagement as means to effect system leadership that all panelists, all patriotic Kwara youth must participate in. Kwara domestication of national development plans. We cannot agree on indices of measuring Kwara performance in Cs, MDGs, and the ERGP. Because not all participants were apolitical, and political affiliation informed the perspectives that some participants spoke from. A youth leader in attendance reprimanded the participant over this. He opined that when issues such as security, economy, and building institution is discussed, we must all put aside our political affiliation and be objective enough to analyze things and chart a course together. We agreed to further deliberate on this particular item on discussion beyond the duration of the summit, so we can move on to other items. Issues on inclusion. The lead panelist on item 3 pointed at how deeply rooted in our society the causes of social exclusions are. The socio-cultural, religious, and systemic aspects to it. She believes that change of attitude is all that is needed first, and we would then graduate towards instituting inclusion and equity into our laws and governance. Kwara in Nigerian states. We noted how Nigerian states had evolved over time and the radical calls for a more rapid evolution, such as the call for restructuring, systematic shake-ups, and so much being questioned. How various zones of the country are forming regional blocks and pursuing different economic operation within their area. We looked at the comparative advantage Kwara has and how we should deal with each economic blocks and geographical regions to maximize our comparative advantage. Participants noted how Kwara is geographically and culturally placed in the whole system of a team, and how much that can be an advantage regardless of how the structure and restructure goes. We noted how we have been leading states in North Central region and need to complement that. We agreed that where the 6 states in Southwest looked up to us when we got it right in higher education can be replicated in other economic goods, services, and we would be focal states in the country given our resources and strategic location. Resolutions. At the end of the debates and deliberations, we resolved at this. A. Continuation. It was agreed that this discourse have to be continued. The issues raised cannot be adjudged to have been finalized yet, as this summit was limited in so many capacities, in space, times, and in attendance. We need all hands to be on deck. We need to extend this discourse even to Kwara youth in diaspora. Hence, we must platforms to sustain this tempo. We must devise a platform to sustain this tempo. B. Government partnership. The organizers of the summit were urged to submit a communique to the government afterwards and facilitate the partnership between youths and government ministries, departments, and agencies. By doing this, governments would have youth as partner in progress and afford them to learn the practice of governance along the way. We also urge governments to involve as much youth as they can in Kwara version of Agenda 2050 and the midterm national development plans. C. Mentorship. We all agreed on the huge impact mentoring can have on personal development. So we urge the Kwara political elites and captain of industries in Kwara or from Kwara to groom our youth who show signs of becoming promising leaders. The youth are also encouraged to believe in their self-worth and flee from political elites who want to indulge them in Stockholm syndrome that leaves them with ultra-low self-esteem. D. Harmony. We salute the youth socio-cultural groups to work on the issue of inclusion. We urge them to work together to foster the harmonious relation of parents by working out the issues that brings about distrust between ethnic or religion groups. Encourage only healthy rivalry and lead us in connecting to the marginalized and vulnerable young people in the remote part of the state. We identified that the excluded consist of women, disabled and uneducated, deviant and destitute persons. We hinted at how much the success of this movement depends on our ability to ensure all youths can be carried along. E. Call to action. We agreed to ensure all the discussions are followed with prompt actions towards set goals. To this end, we encourage participants to share their contact details, form breakout sessions, and fraternize based on individual disciplines, profession, interest, and area of expertise. We recognize that the mission might be beyond Kwara Youth Circle as an organization, so we persuaded these people of collective interest or expertise to form circuits. The following circuits were suggested. 1. Systems and Institutions Circuit, consisting of youths who practice or are involved in law, justice, safety, and security. Policy and Governance, political circuits, would be formed by youths who are serving in government or have in-depth knowledge of governance and policies. 3. Economic circuit should be started by youths in banking, business and enterprise, and all youth in the startup world. They are expected to come up with action plans on enterprise and industries, food, agriculture, and fulfilling the potential of Kwara State in ICT, tourism, and entertainment. 4. Social good circuits, consisting of youths who practice or have interest in medicals, health promotion, environmental protection, and sports. 5. The final circuit suggested is the education circuit. We advise that they should be coming together of youths in teaching, education consultancy, charity, and the academics. We expect them to carry out activities that would solve the education problems in Kwara State from the grassroots. It was suggested that participants should circuits identify themselves based on interest and profession and form the circuit right at the venue of the summit. They were also urged to submit recommendations that can go along with this communique if they can, so it can be brought to government's notice. In conclusion, while circuit promised to convene the summits by the same period of the year in 2021 for a review of actions taken so far and progress made by Kwara youths. Hence, today we are gathered here not just to review our plans for another edition of the summit, but to present our scorecard. Gentlemen of the press, I'm glad to present to you today what the resulting circuit formed from the recommendation of have came up with or done ever since. Firstly, we have the education summit, education circuit. I'll push that to Mr. Sani to carry along.
Good day, compatriots, fellow Kwara youth, gentlemen of the press. Sequent to the resolutions at the Kwara Youth Summit, young educators and Kwarans who have interest in educational development have formed a flexible, non-partisan and action-focused think tank called the Education Circuit. We sustained the discussions from the summit organized by Kwara Youth Circle with focus on education. We have come up with action plans which we hope will form the basis of the educational transformation of Kwara State. The context of our discussions and recommendations are based on national and global discourse in education and social development. They are informed by the following documents. 1. The National Youth Policy Document of 2019 to 2023. 2. The National Policy on Education of 2013. 3. The National ICT Policy. 4. The Economic Recovery and Growth Plan of the Federal Government of Nigeria. 5. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. 6. Analysis and recommendations in educational financing by Budget Nigeria. 7. Education 2030 Framework for Action by the World Education Forum. And 8. The New Vision for Education by the World Economic Forum. We arrive at a vision. The vision we have for Kwara education is an education that will make Kwara State the focus state in the country. And the mission is to develop and attract human capacity that will offer goods and services that cannot be matched elsewhere across the country. And the set objectives are 4. 1. To create human resource ecosystem that will support and attract the most skilled people in the country to Kwara State. 2. To educate future citizens that will maintain the sanctity of our institutions and sustain the tranquility that Kwara State is known for. 3. To maximize our workforce to be up to 80% of the entire population of the state, with more than 40% being skilled workforce. 4. To evolve a unique education system that will make Kwara State the #1 destination for educational tourism. The strategic thrust on which these action plans are based on are equity, inclusive participation, economic efficiency, and sustainability. For equity, equity is the main foundation upon which all our intervention will be based on. We aspire to bridge the learning gap between people who are rich or poor, male or female, rural or urban dwellers, the regular children, as well as children with special needs. In tandem with the goal of Nigerian education, which is to build a just and egalitarian society, and the vision of national youth policy, which is to develop youth with equal opportunity to realize their dreams and aspirations. As youth, with the vigor of youth, we are serious about combating anyone or any institution who have been a barrier to achieving educational equity in our society. 2. The inclusive participation. The only way we can attain the lofty height we've set is to invest in agency and community ownership of all education plans we are rolling out. The school-based management system, popularly called SBMC, must be revitalized. Every young person must take it upon themselves to carry out the proposed intervention, not just where they are living, but in their place of origin. We plan to involve all sectors of the society in the core of the educational process, namely teaching, training, assessment, administration, funding, and educational promotion. We are proposing CLUIN, C-L-U-E-I-N, CLUIN, meaning is an acronym for Citizen-Led Universal Education Intervention. It will be following the design of the PRA Reflect that was suggested in the National Policy of Education. This is the 3-phase action plan comprising of CLE, CLARE, and of crisis. We are starting with the CLE. CLE being C-L-E-I is an acronym which we used to tag Citizen-Led Education Intervention. What do we plan to do there? We would invest in locals and indigenes and diaspora to take responsibility for educational development of their place of origin. We are not leaving education to government this time. We will work with various sociocultural groups to carry out interventions in their towns and villages. The mass media will be heavily involved in promoting educational broadcast and addressing educational issues on their channels. Funding from indigenous philanthropists would be reinforced. Local industries and corporate bodies will be encouraged to focus their corporate social responsibility on educational development. Artisans, for example, will be co-opted as trainers in the vocational skill scheme. Traditional rulers will be co-opted as administrators of the March Education Scheme. Community Development Committee will spearhead donations toward education goals of their hometown. Then declare, CLEAR. It's an acronym for Citizen-Led Educational Attainment Research. What do we plan to do with this? Under this scheme, we will have series of assessments of learning achievement of our skilled children in foundation learning, socio-emotional learning, and the skill gap. We will launch researches to touchlight all the obvious and hidden impediments to educational progress everywhere in Kwara State, up to the farthest corner of this state. After the CLEAR CLEAR, we are launching what we call CLEAR Crisis. What does that crisis mean? CRISIS. It means Crisis in Reading Intervention Scheme. We have a reading crisis on ground. Throughout the country, not less than 60% of children leaving primary school cannot read at basic level. If this is not called a crisis, I wonder what we can call it. So what we plan to do as education circuit, the youth body of Kwara State, forming educational circuit, are organizing a remedial program targeted at helping students who are already in middle basic class but cannot read at the lower basic level. We are working with foremost student leaders in this state to mobilize higher institution students to volunteer to tutor affected children in their hometown. A rigorous literacy clinic is being planned. It's in the offing. It will be coming out to limelight anytime soon. Followed by economic efficiency. Our vision for education is that of self-reliance. A state where federal allocation will form less than 30% of our civil service less lucrative, and government-dependent earnings will form less than 10% of our population. The mainstay of the Vision 2020, the RGP, and the recent National Development Plan is to diversify our economy into service-based economy, to stop reliance on a monoproduct economy. So we are investing in human capital development. Our education in Kwara State can actualize this by developing STEM capabilities, science, technology, engineering and mathematics capabilities that will solve our infrastructural deficit. For example, power issues without relying on the national grid. Our education can also address weak system and institution. We are coming up with purposeful strategy in teaching civics, socio-emotional learning, and personal leadership. We will therefore build a competence-based educational system where no one will graduate from our basic education without being skilled, have a vocational, or possess a verifiable capability for self-reliance. We will continue to be the first to offer training in futuristic skills that is not available elsewhere in Nigeria. We were the first to invest in aeronautics and aviation. Therefore, we can still go forward and be the first to invest in 3D printing and space technology and other futuristic skills. We would be the destination for health tourism, educational tourism, and economic activity that Nigerians formerly sought elsewhere abroad. Finally, stability and sustainability. In our resolve to make all our plans sustainable, we intend that it is to be driven by systems and institutions rather than individuals or organizations. We will not make our plans over-dependent on government budget, donors funding, efficiency of our educational authority, who is in power, pressure from outsiders, or any of such things that has plagued planning and implementation in Nigeria. Though the intervention will be data-driven through an efficient SEMIS, State Education Management and Information System. So we will still require the backing of educational authorities. With SEMIS, we will publish reports which will reflect the exact point that our educational situation is at every point in time. Permit me to add this. If beckoned by the educational authorities, we have come up with a policy draft on education that we want to popularize among the youth of Kwara. We are anxiously waiting that, as proposed in the summit last year, a policy and governance circuit of young Kwaras will be formed so that we can hand them over this draft that we have come up with. The draft has 4 chapters and recommendations. They are: 1. Urgent issues to address in Kwara education. The urgent issues we see deemed fit to address in Kwara education are: we must close the skill gap. We must have system evaluation. We must note our educational financing and put a final touches to it. We must coordinate all form of intervention that is coming from foreign donors, education partners, or indigenes. We must coordinate all interventions to know what our set goals are in education at every point in time. Secondly, in this policy draft is a policy of education at all levels. Thirdly is the issue of inclusion in education. We are discussing the question of access versus quality, the question of gender, the question of disability and the gifted, and the question of universal participation. Finally, in our policy draft, we are reinforcing our strength and carving a niche for Kwara State in Nigeria in ICT and digital transformation, and instituting a new vision whereby every state in Nigeria can be allowed to pursue its own educational policy in such a way that it won't be held back by the rest of the nation. Finally, we are calling on all Kwara youth who have a thing or two to contribute to please come forward and pick up this challenge that we have highlighted earlier. By those of us currently in education circuit, we can't do it alone. We need more exposed Kwara youth. We need more sophisticated and more connected Kwara youth to come forward and pick up this challenge with us. Other circuits are yet to be forged, as we resolved at the Youth Summit. Remember, we resolved to do less of talk and set to work. There is much wrong to be right, most of which are too glaring to tarry on analyzing. Let's evolve into a generation of leaders for a better future, for a better Kwara. I am Sanishe Ahmed, the active coordinator of Kwara Youth Education Summit. Thanks for having me on board.
Thank you, Mr. Sani, and members of the education circuits. May Allah continue to strengthen us for the sake of time, which obviously is fast spent. I would quickly give a quick rundown on what the economic circuits, to which I myself and some other members of the Kwara circuits have done so far. I am from an ICT background, so our first project was in technological empowerment of Kwara youths. 30 young Kwarans across gender and geographical spread were trained in web technology, and we sought opportunities for them therefrom. We have Ilyasu Ibrahim Foundation to thank for employing one of the beneficiaries upon completion of the training. We in the economic circuit still need people with more exposure, connection, knowledge and willpower to make impact in the society. In fact, we need charismatic, cosmopolitan young Kwara to come up and lead the charge in the economic circuit. We would be glad to be informed whenever any group of young Kwaras form other remaining circuits. If we are informed, then we would be able to direct anyone who express interest in your sector, in your circuit. Let me reiterate that these circuits are flexible, semi-formal associations, not necessarily under Kwara Youth Circuit, but focused towards same goals. In the strive for a greater Kwara, I remain your partner in progress, Mahmoud Abdullahi Loki, the coordinator Kwara Youth Circuit, and my partner here,
the director of Project Kwara Circuit, Soli Abdulaziz Damiola,
and Mr. Sani, our acting coordinator of the educational circuit. We can now field questions coming to us.